The alarms started before I even finished mopping the west corridor. Red light poured through the station windows, and the floor under my boots began to shake. I dropped my mop and grabbed the handle of my cart, because I knew that sound. That was not a drill. That was a ship docking hard, the kind of docking that meant someone was angry and did not care about the damage. My name is Dave. I clean floors on this station. Nobody looks at me twice when I walk through the halls, and that has always worked in my favor. Tonight, it was about to become the only thing standing between 4 frightened children and a mother who thought they were gone forever. I ran, not away from the noise, but toward it, because the noise was heading straight for the maintenance wing where I kept them hidden. 6 months ago, I found a broken cargo pod that station records listed as damaged goods. Nobody wanted to deal with the paperwork, so nobody opened it. I did. Inside were 4 small creatures, barely breathing, curled against each other for warmth. Their scales were pale gray, their eyes too big for their heads, and they were starving. I did not think. I just acted, the same way I once acted when my own children needed feeding at 2 in the morning. I carried them to my supply closet, wrapped them in old uniform jackets, and gave them warm broth meant for the cargo robot's lubricant tanks, because it was the only thing close to food I had on hand. I never reported it. I told myself I would, once I figured out what they were. But every day I waited was another day I fell in love with them, and love does not file paperwork. I named them after the stars my wife used to point out to me before she passed. Vega, Lyra, Orion, and Little Nova, the smallest and loudest of the 4. They grew fast, faster than any child I had ever raised before. Within weeks they were walking. Within months they were nearly as tall as my hip, then my waist, then my chest. Their claws grew sharp, their teeth grew sharper, but their hearts stayed soft, because that was all I ever showed them. I taught them to say please before they ate. I taught them to share the mop bucket during bath time. I taught them that being strong did not mean being cruel. Now, as I sprinted down the corridor with my cart rattling behind me, I heard the sound that made my stomach drop. A voice, deep and furious, echoing through the station intercom system that the security team had failed to shut down in time. "Where are my children?" I knew that voice belonged to no ordinary visitor. The security chief had warned everyone on shift that a warship had entered the docking bay without clearance, flying colors that matched a queen of the Vantari fleet, a race known across 3 systems for their strength and their short temper. I had heard stories about the Vantari, stories about how their younglings were raised hard, trained early to fight, taught that softness meant death. I had never believed those stories applied to the 4 little ones sleeping in my closet every night, wrapped around each other like puppies. I turned the corner and saw the station commander standing frozen near the command room doors, sweat on his forehead, 2 guards beside him shaking so badly their weapons rattled. In front of them stood a creature nearly 8 feet tall, covered in deep violet scales, her eyes burning gold with something between fear and rage. This was Yithis, queen of her people, and she looked ready to tear the station apart with her bare hands if someone did not answer her question fast. "Where are my children?" she said again, quieter this time, which somehow felt more dangerous than her shouting. The commander stammered that there had been an accident, that the pod was listed as damaged, that nobody knew anything survived. Her claws extended, scraping against the metal floor, and the sound sent a shiver down every spine in that hallway except mine, because I already knew the truth, and the truth was walking right behind me. I had left the closet door slightly open when I ran, and 4 sets of small feet had followed me the entire way, curious as always, unable to resist the excitement in the air. Vega peeked around my leg first, then Lyra, then Orion, taller than his sisters, always trying to look brave, and finally Nova, who never liked being left out of anything, pushed past all of them and walked straight toward the queen without a single ounce of fear. The entire hallway went silent. Yithis turned so fast the air cracked around her. Her golden eyes locked onto the 4 small figures standing beside my cart, and for a moment, I thought she might collapse right there on the floor. Her clawed hand rose to her chest, trembling, as she whispered their names. Names I had never heard before. Ancient Vantari names that must have been given to them before I ever found that pod. Nova tilted her head and looked up at me, confused by the stranger's tears, because Vantari were not supposed to cry, not according to every story I had ever heard. "Mama," Nova said, testing the word carefully, unsure if it was even the right one to use. Ithis dropped to her knees, her massive frame shaking the floor, and reached out one clawed hand toward her daughter. Nova did not flinch. She stepped forward and placed her small hand against her mother's palm, comparing the size difference with the kind of innocent curiosity only a child could have in a moment like that. For a long stretch of time, nobody in that hallway moved. The guards lowered their weapons. The commander stopped stammering. Even the alarms seemed to fade into the background, as if the station itself understood that something far more important than protocol was happening. Euthys finally looked up at me, and her expression shifted from grief to something sharper, something closer to suspicion. She rose to her full height, towering over me the way a mountain towers over a single tree, and asked who I was, and why her children were not afraid of me, and why they called me by a title reserved for their own kind. I told her the truth. I told her about the broken pod, about the cold night I found them, about the broth and the blankets, and the years of quiet feeding and teaching that followed. I told her I never meant to keep them a secret forever, but every day that passed made it harder to imagine giving them up. She studied me for a long moment, her eyes narrowing, searching my face for any sign of a lie. "Vantari younglings," she said slowly, "are raised without softness, because softness gets them killed in our world." Yet here stood her children, calm, affectionate, unafraid of a queen who could crush stone with one hand, simply because a janitor had shown them nothing but patience since the day they hatched. Orion stepped forward then, standing taller than I had ever seen him stand, and spoke in halting Vantari, mixed with the human words I had taught him. He told his mother that Dave taught them to count the stars, to fix broken machines, to help each other when they fell. He told her that Dave never once raised his voice, even when Nova broke 3 mop handles in a single week, trying to use them as swords. Lyra added that Dave always saved the last piece of bread for whoever was still hungry. Vega, quieter than her siblings, simply walked over and leaned against my side, resting her head against my arm the way she did every night before falling asleep. Euthys watched all of this unfold, her expression softening bit by bit, the fire in her golden eyes cooling into something closer to wonder. She lowered herself again, this time not out of grief, but out of respect, kneeling before a man half her size who held no weapon, no title, and no fleet behind him. She said that among her people, strength was measured in battles won and enemies defeated. Yet here, in front of her, stood proof of a different kind of strength, one built from patience, sacrifice, and quiet devotion that never asked for recognition. She said humans were often dismissed by other races as weak, small, unimportant. She said she now understood why that judgment was a mistake. She asked what I wanted in return for raising her children as if they were my own. The commander behind her practically choked on his own breath, clearly expecting me to ask for wealth, or a ship, or a place among the stars. I told her I only wanted to keep seeing them. I told her cleaning floors was not glamorous, but it gave me purpose, and so did they. I did not need a reward for doing what any decent person would have done. Euthys rose to her feet, placed one clawed hand gently on my shoulder, careful not to press too hard, and declared in front of everyone that my home would always be welcome among her people, and that her children would never forget who first taught them kindness. The 4 of them cheered, wrapping their arms around my legs, nearly knocking me over with the force of 4 excited hugs at once. The guards finally lowered their weapons completely, and the commander let out a breath he must have been holding since the alarms first sounded. Later that night, after the Queen's ship had powered down and the station had returned to its usual quiet hum, I walked my usual rounds again, mop in one hand, cart rattling behind me. Except this time, 4 sets of footsteps followed close behind, insisting on helping, arguing over who got to hold the mop first, laughing every time Nova splashed water on her own boots by accident. I never expected my life to turn out this way. I never expected to raise the children of a queen from the stars. But as I looked down at 4 faces smiling up at me, covered in soap bubbles and pride, I realized something simple and true. Kindness never asks where you come from before it decides to grow. It just needs someone patient enough to give it room. And on this station, In a supply closet nobody else ever thought to check, kindness had grown into something the whole galaxy would remember.